see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Hi, it's Edwin Rutsch, and this is Dialogs on how to build a culture of empathy and compassion. And I'm here today with John Raymer, who's a friend of mine. And John, thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure, Edwin. Thanks for all the good work you do.
Thanks, John. So you're co-founder of Compassionate Seattle, and I just see here the tagline is awakening compassion within ourselves, our children, and the world. And you're also co-founder of the Ideal Network. Is there a little bit more you'd like to say, just by way of introduction, about your background?
Well, I'm a realistic optimist. I like to think of myself that way. These different organizational expressions of them are all kind of related around that, this notion of building deep social networks. So Ideal is a B Corp, actually, to help fund nonprofits and schools. Compassionate Seattle grew out of the Compassionate Action Network, which grew out of the visit from the Dalai Lama to Seattle in 2008 at the Seeds of Compassion. So there's all sorts of related stuff. I'm sure it's going to come up. But someone was kind enough to put a Wikipedia page about me. So if you Jon Raymer, R-A-M-E-R, you'll find me on Wikipedia. It's not completely up to date, but there's something there.
Okay. So I was thinking, I'm trying a new approach here, asking people about what their most important value is, kind of to start off with. What do you think for you personally is your most important value in life?
Well, I think integrity in a certain way. I mean, this work calls us to be authentic. It's hard to encourage anyone to be compassionate when you don't feel like you're being compassionate yourself. Authenticity, the sincerity, all of that starts from within. And that's been my theme in all of this, is that it's a practice more than it is like a business or an offer or a promise. It's something that's kind of an unfolding and a challenging one at best. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is really more of a question than an answer. So integrity and authenticity.
So it's really being authentic, who you are as a human being, and being able to share that with others.
It really helps. When people are vulnerable and able to be who they are, it gives more room for all of us to be who we are. And, if we don't stop being the way we're being, we're going to end up where we're going. So, I'm encouraging myself to find a new way and hoping that it inspires others to join with me. You're a good example, Edwin.
Well, I'm on your Facebook page right now, and on your Facebook page, I'm seeing a picture of you as a bit of a troubadour, and a nice and a beautiful guitar with a red background. So it looks like this is kind of related to the integrity of expressing yourself as a musician.
Yeah, I mean, music's really the best teacher. I mean, when it all comes down, I've read a lot of stuff, I've talked to a lot of people, but I've learned more from music than anything else. It challenges you to play something you've played before, but actually play it like it's never been played before. And life should be like that, right? We're so present in the moment. And then the whole dynamic of working with other people and playing with other people is so interesting, because there's a very clear moment when you're not just playing your instruments at the same time, but you actually have this experience of making music. And it's sometimes, and then it goes even to greater levels as you learn to harmonize with each other and know each other's other voices and know how to serve each other that way. The whole essence of collaboration. I think everything we need to know about how to build a culture of empathy, we can learn in music. I think if we sang our way, we'd get there a lot sooner than if we tried to talk our way to it.
Yeah.
I'm biased as a musician.
Yeah. Well, I think the arts is just such a great way to get in contact with ourselves. It's like you're talking about authenticity, and there's something about the arts that seems to bring out that authenticity within us.
Yes. It isn't valued the same in our culture. And it's sad with music. A lot of times people tell me, well, I don't have a good voice, so I don't sing. It's like if we can't turn it into a business, and we shouldn't be doing it, and that's silly. It's so sad to see the arts being cut in schools because of the budget crisis and less exposure. But it's coming in other ways. People getting it. Young people get it through, online. So, and there's apps that can make you able to make music without ever having to study music. I think that's awesome. I spent a lot of time trying to learn music.
Yeah, so it's getting easier and easier to learn the arts. There's a lot of ways.
I think that's good. I think we've got to deprofessionalize, open source everything. So the know-how to make music, because I think it'll bring us closer to this culture of empathy. I mean, I'm not joking about how much I think we could learn from music itself as a practice, and making music with each other, and all the issues that come getting in tune with each other, right? And saying, well, what's the point of this piece we're going to play together? And our collaborations, I think, would be more effective if they were orchestrated as a collaboration that way.
Yeah, kind of like in a band. The band is very kind of, there's a lot of collaboration and kind of getting in tune with someone else, and kind of anticipation of where the other is going. And so it's just like a real dynamic aspect of empathy, maybe.
Yeah, you have to have clarity about who you are, what your identity is, how you make space for each other. How can you really create something greater than the parts? That's what I hope, and that's what I'm betting on. That's going to come from all these hours and efforts, and all these interviews are beautiful unto themselves, but what they represent as a whole is an expression that we can't fully even imagine yet. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm so grateful to you, Edwin, for leading us into this uncharted waters.
Well, the dialogues are really about, how do we build a culture of empathy and compassion. So I find it's kind of a nice way to start also with that is with a metaphor of what your metaphor for empathy and or compassion is, in the sense that, empathy is often described as standing in someone else's shoes, looking through someone else's eyes. For me, empathy is like a cornucopia in terms of that sharing, that richness that we get to share with others. And kind of from your own imagination, what would be your metaphor for what empathy is like?
Making love. I'd put that right up there with music. Okay, That's gotten to the most important practices I know. I think, without getting erotic, or I want to stay in your G-rated interviews here, but you can learn a lot about empathy from being with your partner and being present to your partner. I think it's a pretty good metaphor.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, because I see that too as one of the deepest forms of empathy, because you're kind of really open, you're exploring kind of your souls with each other, and it's all about empathy and connecting, and so that's a beautiful. That's really, I think that really that resonates too with me. So, what does a culture of empathy look like, kind of metaphorically?
Well, a culture of empathy would encourage each of us to express ourselves in our intimacy, however is appropriate, whether it's singing or dancing or loving. We would be getting the encouragement to be that way. In fact, I'm here to announce something on your show. It's not that I'm running for president, but I thought it would be a nice thing to announce. Seattle started with this idea of affirming the Charter for Compassion and became the first city, which we're very proud of. But there's this other city this upstart city is really getting on our nerves out here, Louisville. And the mayor of Louisville is incredible. They came out here and we gave them this Model City Award. Well, sure enough, they've now challenged us to the Compassion Games, Survival of the Kindest. And we are responding to Louisville. I could show you the video from the mayor. It's amazing, okay? These guys, the mayor did this thing called Give a Day. 90,000 people volunteered. So a culture of empathy would use creativity and fun to move us towards those values. So we are responding to the challenge from Louisville. I'm announcing it on your Culture of Empathy show. And Seattle and the bioregion will respond to the community challenge from Louisville with Muhammad Ali as part of as well. Okay, so I'm going to get the sports stars, everyone here. And September 21st to October 21st is a 30-day compassion games starting here in Seattle, in which we're going to come up with lots of ways to respond by doing community service. And we invite your listeners to tune in and maybe start a compassion games in their neck of the woods. And if each of the cities, because they've encouraged us to come and kick their butts. That's what they said, that they hope Seattle kicks their butt. And since they're a compassionate city, they said they offered to help us do that. So it's really sweet. And then the mayor's awesome. This guy's the right kind of political leader we'd love to see. His name is Greg Fisher, the mayor of Louisville. He ran with one of his 3 pillars, being compassion. He was elected, and he's delivering on it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
he actually ran that was part of his platform, is a compassionate city.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, you've been a real organizer in trying to build a culture of empathy and compassion. I mean, you've been doing all the kind of the nuts and bolts kind of work of it, the community organizing of it there in Seattle. Creating the Compassionate Seattle site on Ning, and I think there's 3,000 or 4,000 or whatever members, if not more. You're kind of doing kind of that on the ground kind of organizing of holding conferences and like restorative processes, and now you're doing the compassion games. I mean, this would be like the moment in Greece when they started the Olympics or something.
Yes, exactly. An abundance of goodness is greatness, and an abundance of greatness is magnificence. And that's what we need from all of us right now. So I'm very privileged to have the partnership and the folks with us who believe that, like you and others, that this is a calling, that it's worthy of our lives and something we need to be doing. The Native Americans, indigenous wisdom has guided us here in terms of our own values. There's a beautiful statement that comes from the fourth way, as it's known. First way being assimilation. I come in, take over. Second way is you fight, so we have conflict. The third way is you give up and give in, so there's resignation, hopelessness, and despair, which is what you see a lot in Native American communities. But the fourth way is cooperation. And the summary statement of these 16 guiding principles says, starting from within, working in a circle, in a sacred manner, we heal and develop ourselves, our relationships, and the world. And those guiding principles have led us to what we've been doing here in Seattle, truly as a collective impact of the community. And the Compassionate Action Network International now has 85 cities around the world that are engaging in these campaigns to create compassionate communities. And you need what I call a 4-way partnership: the bottom up, top down, inside out, and outside in. So we're learning from other cities, we're learning from other communities, we're sharing with other communities, but knowing, again, that it always starts from within ourselves. And if you follow this thread, this is where it leads. You find yourself talking to Edwin eventually as part of creating the culture of empathy.
So how did that kind of start for you personally? I mean, was there some moment in your life where you kind of had an aha moment about the importance of empathy and compassion, or is it just kind of this gradual process? Or, if you kind of look back, from childhood or whenever, like what happened to get you kind of interested in this?
Well, there are lots of questions that we really don't know the answer to, right? The really big questions we don't know. I mean, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know if there's a real purpose to life and all that. But one thing I've seen through all these different traditions is this notion of service, this notion that that we receive by giving. And so part of my particular tradition, I'm from the tribe, the Jewish Brooklyn tribe. They have this beautiful Hebrew phrase, tikkun olam, which means to mend and heal and transform the world. So, all I want to do is make my mother proud. So, that was the path I was shown as a child, that this is what life's about, is service in this way. I don't want to be righteous about it. You know, I receive from giving. It's that dynamic of giving and receiving that I think is really wise. In Kabbalah, they say the only difference between people and God is that God is the desire to give, but has no desire to receive. Because if you created everything, there's no need to receive. We're born with not just the desire to give, but this desire to receive. And how we work that out is our whole life's journey, and how we balance, because we often give as a way of receiving, and we also receive by giving. And that's a dynamic that I think it's probably the whole story is really just neatly compacted in this issue about where those impulses come from to both give and receive. But they were here before I was born. I was born into that narrative. And I think it's one of our great transition stories, is how we're going to come to understand our role in the universe as a living system and our need to be in service to it and each other.
Well, there seems to be kind of two parts to that. One, are you saying you're kind of biologically just wired for that, in the sense of the scientific, that we're just human beings are wired for connection, and there's also the part that you have the Jewish tradition and a Jewish mother who said this is the way things are supposed to be, and you're going to do it this way.
Right. Well, this goes into the category of I don't know. Is it nature? Is it nurture? Who cares in a certain way? Because we don't know for sure, right? If we're so focused on being right, we're missing the opportunity, right? Let's just assume that it is nurture, and that we'll take whatever we get from nature and build from there. And if there's some way that I can learn from you and learn from each other to how to make my life a more meaningful expression of the magnificence I talked about before. I mean, that's what we need. We need an abundance of greatness. We need to all be great. This is worthy of our lives, and this is what we're called to. So, a lot of the big questions, like I said, are really, I don't know. But if I choose to say, well, how am I going to act in light of that not knowing, I'm going to assume that my life can make a difference, that we actually can do these kind of things together, that we're not just wasting our time, and that it's worthy of our lives. And therefore, if there's any way we can nurture each other in a way that inspires us to be more of who we really are and do what really moves us when we're given the choice, I think many people would move to creating a culture of empathy. Although, you and I don't agree about whether it's empathy first or compassion first, whether emptiness, empathy and happiness and love. And that's one of the challenges we face. Everyone's got their version of it and needs to take ownership in it. So I jokingly, you and I laugh about this a lot, because people are very much doing their thing, and you've got to find a container big enough to hold everybody's thing in it, so people feel like it's another way of doing their thing as opposed to you being co-opted by your thing.
Yeah.
Sensitivity to how to effectively organize.
Yeah, that's why I was asking you about your values. What's important to you, and you brought up integrity. And I've asked a lot of people about their values, and everyone has a different value, and that is important to them, that they organize their lives around, and how those values relate is really something to look at too. How do they interact? Because like you were saying, we've had this dialogue. Like, I'm a big proponent of empathy. We got to focus on empathy, and you're saying no, it's compassion. And then we kind of joke, no, you got it wrong. And so there's this little, and then you can ask the folks, that are working on peace, and it's like, no, peace. You got to have peace first. And then somebody else is nonviolence. And then, no, justice, we got to have justice first. And then if you're in the conservative realm, right, it's liberty, we must have liberty. No, freedom. So, yeah, it's like, how do you kind of deal with that dynamic so that everyone is heard? And
right. Well, I really think it's kind of like a design challenge, because identity is the issue here, right? And where we have our own stories about each of us exists as a particular and personal interpretation, right, of our view of the world. Yet we also live in relationship to others. We have our story about each other, about how does compassion fit with empathy, or does fit with love, or, and that's what keeps us separate. I mean, that's the fiction here. That's kind of the whammy. That's kind of the, the spell, the trance that we're in, is somehow that these things are all separate. Even though we all say they're connected, it's so funny because I hear us say that, oh, well, we're all interdependent and connected, but then operate like we're totally separate and don't know how to share with each other, don't know how to know each other, don't know how to think strategically with each other. For me, strategy means turning what we have into what we need. But what can I count? Can I count some of your stuff as part of what I have? Can you count some of my stuff as part of what you have? Where's that boundary? And how is that boundary serving us? And how is that boundary also limiting us?
Yeah.
I think that's a core issue.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, where's those boundaries between each other? And I guess if integrity is what's important to you, what do you see as the relationship? I mean, it's like there's the relationship to empathy. What does empathy and integrity have to do with each other? Because all these values, it's kind of like they all interrelate and kind of work together. It's not like they're separate beings out there. There's some kind of a relationship that's going on. So if integrity is important, how is integrity relating to empathy for you?
Well, the way I'd relate it is it's like integrity is what would call me to be most fully present with you. So I was in a meeting the other day and somebody made a statement that led me to think that they might have been hinting at to thinking of taking their life, you know? And there was integrity that said, I cannot ignore that comment. And so that brought me to go over to that person. That required me to be more intimate with that person, or more direct with that person, or more probing with that person than maybe, I would have been. But I felt it would be out of my own integrity, that I'd be not being fully who I am to have heard what she said and not go up to her and say, hey, are you okay? And it was, it was only like, I felt like only maybe I would even pick it up because I knew enough about other pieces of her life. So that little small voice that says, hey, wait a minute, there's something there to pay attention to. If you're ignoring that voice, then I think, at least for me, then I'm out of my integrity.
Mm. Yeah, so there's these voices that we have. It's almost like a natural flow within all of us, and we can either maybe ignore him, just say, no, I'm not going to deal with this, maybe out of fear or whatever, or we can really kind of open up and kind of connect to those voices that are inside of us, and really maybe honor every voice that is there.
Well, that's one of the big changes in my lifetime, Edwin. When I was a kid, if you would have told people that you, quote, have voices in your head, they would have thought you were crazy, right? There was this is how it was. And I've watched in my lifetime that we've grown in our own integrity and honesty to say, wait a minute, there's a different phenomenon going on. We're in this narrative all the time. And great philosophers like Heidegger and others have pointed to this phenomenon as always already. That this listening is always already, that we show up late, that we don't control our thoughts. Our thoughts happen. And then we are in relation to those thoughts. We're hearing those thoughts and then responding. In fact, that's the way communication happens. According to guys like Umberto Maturana and Francisco Varela, they wrote this book, The Tree of Knowledge. It was a huge influence on me. It's about the biological roots of human cognition. And that we're closed systems. You can't get to Spanish by speaking English. And that when I speak, that you don't really hear what I'm saying. My speaking is a perturbation that triggers your own closed system to generate interpretation. So I've been frustrated for a large part of my life thinking, I say what I say, that people are going to actually hear what I said. And I've come to realize that's not how it works at all. That you say what you say, people hear what they hear. And you need to check. That's part of the integrity again, to find out being responsible. An effective communicator isn't just expressing your intentions, but being responsible for what people are hearing. And in that way, the challenge that we face to be effective communicators requires that we disclose some of those voices, right? Those thoughts. You say things, it triggers who knows what in you. And usually, most of the time, it has nothing to do with what I said.
Yeah, so the integrity is really then is about being sure that all the voices inside of ourselves, and voices is really the different feelings, maybe, right? All the different feelings that are coming up, the thoughts that they're, and the kind of the energy that we're expressing them instead of holding them back.
Right, and
And
that
then,
triggering thoughts in you. I'm saying that communicative competence is not just the capacity to articulate, to project, those intentions, but to be responsible for all those voices getting triggered in all the people that you're speaking with.
uh-huh.
That's happening over there, and to just sort out. In fact, did you hear what I said, and did what I
Uh-huh.
say, make sense to you? Is part of the obligation of effective communication.
Mm-hmm. So is we're kind of expressing something that if we can ask for reflection or something, some
Yeah.
way of making sure that this connection process kind of happens more smoothly. And so the part is the integrity is sharing all that comes up with us in kind of with a openness and a transparency, and then kind of putting it out there, but then double checking that it's kind of like landing with others, and then as others are sharing with us, that we kind of bring up what our response is to what they're saying or being,
Yeah,
and
okay. This is
kind of like.
interesting. Let's go a little deeper,
Mm-hmm.
because I wouldn't say that integrity means just disclosing every thought I have, okay? That actually thinking is that discriminative act, right? So the thoughts just happen, but I formulate them into intentions, right? So when I communicate, I want to be clear: am I making an assertion? Am I making an assessment? Am I making a request? Am I making an offer? Now, this is stuff I learned from the philosophy of language, okay? So the integrity is to be clear about what my intentions are, right? Now, I'm not always present to this either, okay? But so, because I used to think, and I learned from a mentor who used to communicate, he said, on a need to know basis. And that drove me crazy at first. What do you mean? So you're like intentionally withholding from people? And I came to realize that there was some wisdom there. You're the adult and there's children, and there's different answers to the same question at different stages of people's lives. And when a child asks you, about the sun, where does the sun go? When they're little kids, fine to say the sun sets, even though the sun isn't setting. That's an okay answer. So anyway, the point is that I think there is integrity in getting clear in our thinking and our speaking. And I don't just want to say every thought in my head. I do want to be clear about what I'm saying and be responsible for what I'm saying. But then I want to also be responsible for what you're interpreting based upon what I said. So in that spirit, Edwin, what do you think I'm saying?
It's kind of like you're holding, you wanting to hold your humanity and the other person's humanity kind of at the same time, so
Yes.
that we have our common humanity. And you think it's like, well, how is this going to affect and be seen by another person, and
Right.
you're kind of, there's a, you have to have an openness of awareness to kind of hold, one person there, or maybe a couple or more. You're like, it's like expanding your awareness to hold all of humanity, and how is my actions going to affect the person, or is it going to hurt them, or
And what effect
that.
has it had? And what effect has it had? And
Mm-hmm.
you're really right to frame it that way, because that's where I think love sets in. I mean, love is making room for others' interpretations. And, that's part of the challenge we face, to keep building the table, making the table big enough to include diverse viewpoints on things. And that's how we learn and grow from each other. So, yes, that I say what I say, you hear what you hear, that I can take responsibility for what you're hearing, to clarify with you, and be open enough to realizing that you may have, different views that could in fact enrich my perspective. That's the only way I've ever learned. The rabbis once said that the Messiah will come when everyone tells the truth about all of their sources. When everyone, like references, says, I learned this from this person and I learned this from that person. If we would all just disclose actually where we learn what we learn from, that would bring upon the culture of empathy that you seek.
Hmm. Yeah, that one's a little different. That's I know in the right, the Jewish books, they always make all these notations on it. So it's like notation on top of notation on top of notation on top of notation.
It's about integrity. It's
Mhm.
about disclosure. It's about this kind of, as a composer of music, and the ideas you have, Edwin, I'm sure if you really tell the truth, you don't know where they come from. You're inspired. Some thought arrived in your head that, wow, I ought to start doing these interviews. And yes, we attribute it to Edwin, and thank God for that, Edwin. I'm grateful to you. And yet, I'm sure you in your own quiet with yourself says, boy, what's possessed me? Where these ideas come from? That I think as a composer and a writer, when I sit down, there's that kind of mysterious sense of it flowing through us.
Mm. So you like to kind of keep a sense of the mysterious and the mystery of life, then.
I think accepting,
Hmm.
that, and knowing that there's no one great name for this, right?
Yeah.
That's where we get attached again, right? That there is no one right answer, but that when we accept the mystery of life, that's how God shows up for us, or whatever we call it, right?
Well, the trying to nail down the mystery of life can be very controlling, right? And
Yeah,
and then we kind of constrict, and then if we can kind of give it more space, we're more open to the integrity maybe of life.
yeah, I can't imagine trying to understand the mystery of life. Understanding the mystery of life almost seems like an oxymoron in some way.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't
So
know what an oxymoron is.
yeah, I've always had trouble with that word
I'm
too.
happy with the moron part. I got that.
And you got your humor too. It keeps you open to your humor and your
Yes.
quick-wittedness. Yeah. So the relationship of that integrity to empathy is how are you seeing it? I mean, I have some ideas about it um, but
Well, I think it's being whole. It's being complete. It's, if you're in pain and I ignore your pain, or, even someone called this like a sweet sadness or something. It's a sad joy or something the other day. And like, this is a Buddhist who was explaining this concept to me, but like, it's appreciating your wins and loses, and your losses. I think empathy includes making space to celebrate with you the successes in your life, and being there to appreciate the good as well as the difficult.
yeah, that's kind of how I see it too. I do it that I do this freestyle dance. So for me, it's like your music, right? It's where you kind of move out of the thoughts so much and really get into the felt experience of what's going on and how am I in a feeling way relating to others. And so that's how I kind of see the empathy. It's like kind of being open to that full experience of everything, of all the nuances, all the subtleties of someone else's experience. And for me, that's where the cornucopia comes in to kind of open to others and kind of want that. I guess there's also kind of a question that comes up for me is about the intention. Like, if we're wanting to build this culture of empathy and compassion, there's got to be some kind of an intention where it's like that we kind of say, oh, this is what I want to do. And I mean, you're like a dynamo. I mean, you're like almost like a bulldog, in terms of I mean, you're just plugging away you're creating so many projects, so much. There's got to be some, kind of underlying drive and intention for wanting to do that. And if we want to get people involved in creating a culture of empathy, I think we need to find those intentions.
Yeah, yes, we do. You need the will and the way. And activating the will is a very mysterious process. Some people are motivated by fear. I mean, that's one of the things that's happened in Seattle recently. We had a wave of gun violence, and the truth is people feel very disconnected and isolated from each other. When you talk about safety in your communities, that's what you find. It's not the police who are going to make you safe. It's knowing your neighbors and that sense of isolation. So how you communicate is important to activate the will and to get people involved. And that's very important. That's a key thing to being effective at all this stuff, because, there's the head, the heart, and the hands. And we need all of it. So you got to work at different levels. There are people who are more, lean towards more of the emotional dimensions of this. They move in their heart. There are other people that are very practical about the whole thing. We have to have measurable results, and how do we really know we're doing it? There are people who, see it at a theoretical level. I think we need all of that. We connect through our similarity, but we can innovate through our diversity, and use the fact that we see things differently, not as something that keeps us apart, but actually can help us attain the goals that we seek.
Well, this kind of brings me a bit to the definition part that we were kind of skirting around before. And for me, the definition of empathy that I'm using is like that empathy is like a 4 parts to it. The first part is self-empathy, so it's sensory awareness, mindfulness, just of what's going on inside of ourselves. And the second part is mirrored empathy, which is through mirror neurons that when we see an action and do an action, the same neurons fire. And that mirror neuron, so as you're kind of shaking your head a little bit in acknowledgement, I can feel myself mirroring that. And as I'm, calmer, more open, I become more attuned. I have the ability to kind of attune to you through the mirror neurons. The third part is imaginative empathy, or the academics call it perspective taking or cognitive empathy, which is as we realize that we're separate beings with self-awareness, we kind of realize that we have a different perspective on life. And I just interviewed Susan Partnow, who's I think you know well, and she mentioned the box, and there's something in the box, and if you look through different holes, you're seeing that object from different angles, and then it's kind of like with self awareness, we know that the other person's actually seeing it from this other angle. And so we have that kind of imaginative. We can imagine what angle they're seeing it from. And then the third part is empathic action, which is, as we kind of.
I think this is the fourth part.
Wasn't the fourth part? Yeah, thanks. That was the third, imaginative empathy.
Imaginative, right.
And then the fourth part is empathic action, which is as we kind of line those up. We have deeper self-awareness, deeper, mirrored empathy, and you know that well from your music playing when you're just like really in tune with somebody, and then those other parts, and then it's like, okay, we're gonna, work together, and we kind of hold each other's humanity, and then we kind of take our action of what we're going to do to, improve our well-being. That's kind of like the empathic action component.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm just saying that because a lot of the things you're saying, I think for me, that's how I kind of model it.
Well, it's very helpful. I mean, to hear how you're seeing it now as a result of all these conversations. Let me say it back to you, see if I understood what you're saying. First thing starts from within, with oneself. Then there's that other interaction with you. That's where you see the mirror neurons kicking in, where I'm right here with you now and experiencing. And funny that we're doing it this way through Skype, but I'm actually able to, right? There you go. That works. The third way is imagining the possibility of how we might be empathic together. And then that fourth is actually acting on fulfilling those possibilities. And now action, in our culture is interesting. I learned this philosophy of action. We often think of action like doing things, like movement. But actually action is speech acts, it's commitments, it's requests, it's promises, it's the engagement at a linguistic level that we think about. I mean, the reason why I'm on this call, which is certainly an action, is because you invited me and I promised. So we need to get better at action too, and possibility. Have the conversations for possibilities together, and then the conversations for action to follow through and turn. The possibility is something that isn't going to happen and may happen, and then action is actually turning it into offers, requests, and following through on that. And that's what I'm hoping, is the pattern we're emerging with.
Yeah, and there's kind of a negotiation part in that, in the actions. Like how about we try this? Well, I can't. I do. Well, I hear what you're saying, and we're kind of, going forward. kind of in a holding each other's humanity and awareness of each other.
Yeah,
In
those
that,
conversations for action. I mean, this is something I learned from Fernando Flores, a great teacher, with all of this stuff. Talked about speech act theory, and that's exactly that. That organizations are networks of commitments, and that those negotiations are what they would call conversations for action. They start with requests or offers, and people counteroffer and decline. And part of building the trust that we need is that people need to own their commitments and take responsibility for the consequences of not fulfilling their commitments, and having the empathy and trust with each other. Know that we can't always fulfill our promises, but we can still take responsibility for cleaning up those messes.
yeah, and it's that. That part where if we don't do a commitment, then we feel, oh, that person, what would that person feel like if I don't fulfill this commitment? So we're kind of holding their,
Right?
maybe a little bit of pain that they might have felt, like being, discounted or something.
That's
And
right.
yeah, and I kind of see it as the wheel of empathy. So it's not like just necessarily a layered part like those four parts, but they
Uh-huh.
kind of go around in a wheel, and like a wheel they kind of intersect, so it's not just a simple. So anyway,
Right.
it's kind of a model, that I've kind of put together from all these dialogues, and I keep testing it out on different, some of the experts there on, who've been studying this, and so far it seems to be, resonating. It seems to put together some of these ideas and concepts that
Edwin, I'd encourage you, this is a request actually, to continue to articulate that summary, that draw that as you see it, name it as you see it. That would be a great benefit for us, because you are immersing yourself in this narrative, in this discourse, right? So empathy is a discourse. It's a historical conversation. It was here before we were born. It'll be after we're gone. There's certain classics about empathy that I'm sure you're discovering. There's the current state of empathy. There's the history of empathy. There's the articulations about what empathy might be in the future. But you're the holder of this whole discourse on empathy, and I encourage you to continue to reflect upon what you're learning and share those reflections.
Yeah, there's a web page I have, for definitions, kind of like a work in progress. So we're actually putting together a team to kind of work on kind of deepening that, and then to tie it in and to compassion. So the way I've kind of seen it is that that's that same model, but it's focused on the nature of suffering. Like we can apply that consciousness or way, that empathy to different feelings. You can be creative. I can feel your creativity. You can be sad. I can feel your sadness. You can be in pain and be suffering from any number of reasons. And the compassion is kind of the word used uh, directed at suffering, and it can be your own suffering. So then it becomes self-compassion, and then if I'm mirroring, I'm seeing your suffering through the mirror, then what am I going to do about that? And this, so it works. It's kind of like the same pattern, but and also that reflecting, what you did, reflecting back, that felt really good to hear it. Kind of what I was saying, kind of reflected back. So there's something about that. All the tools that actually help in the empathic connection
Right, right.
for exploring those tools.
That's right. And it builds trust, right? Because then you have not just the sincerity part, but by me disclosing what I think you said, it gives you confidence that you're being heard, and takes us to the next level. I mean, it's up to us in terms of the quality of this conversation, what we can create. And by that way, I want to take a moment to the millions of people who will be watching this, to encourage them to be empathic and donate to Edwin and the culture of empathy. I mean, if you like this conversation and all the other conversations he's doing, he's too shy to ask himself, but I thought I would put a plug out. I'm assuming there's a PayPal button or something like that, and let's make it. I mean, look at the value that we're all gaining from Edwin doing this, and what can we do to contribute and pitch in and be supportive of that? I think it would be sad to see the world not respond in an empathic way to the enormous, generous gift that you're giving to us, Edwin.
Well, that's very kind of you to mention that. I will put a PayPal button in there, so now I have to.
It's amazing how he has it in 100 languages. So, sorry, I'm kidding.
Yeah, well, that's cool. So it's I really enjoy this exploration of these nuances, and you've really given this a lot of thought because you've been really thinking about this a lot yourself and the nature of compassion. You've been on the ground, kind of working with this, and really, putting yourself on the front lines of the hard knocks of how do you deal with the big confrontations that have happened in the cities, with the restorative process. People have, kind of killings that have happened, and you've worked at, addressing those. So you have a wealth of a wealth of insight and really about
We're
this.
really doing it. I mean, I think everybody believes you got to walk the path, and by walking the path, you make it visible. And so there's a head, but there's also a hands and a heart to this, like I said earlier. So it's true that we've had this beautiful story. It turned out a tragic episode where a Native American carver was killed by the police. Really a way that was not, I mean, I can't imagine any killing it's good, but this was really particularly bad and inflamed a lot of pain. And a restorative circle was called through Compassion Action Network 2 weeks after the shooting. The chief of police participated, to his credit, and his key people, and the Native American family and members of the tribe. And the outcome is a beautiful story of this totem pole that ended up being carved by the community and raised and gifted to the city at the center of Seattle. So, these are real life stories, and it is the stories. We need to tell new stories, and that's kind of probably a nice thread back to this past couple of days. I was with Dwayne Elgin, just such a wise teacher, and has a website, Great Transition Stories. And what he's doing there is it's the same issue we are facing here, is that these archetypal stories, empathy, compassion, love, peace, they almost come and go like fads in a certain way. And we can't get hung up on the terms because the way the mainstream narrative is. But there are archetypical stories that are embedding, in the background against which we're trying to do all that. And Dwayne has done an incredible job of laying out these different narratives. I don't know if you brought it up or if you can see it.
What was it again? Great
transitionstories.org. It's a wiki site. And what you're looking to do is create a new story about empathy, right? And a new story about culture. And did I give you the right URL?
Great transitions. Let me see.
Second one. It was the second one.
Okay.
Because it fits really well with the ambitious project you've taken on.
Oh, there it is, a wiki.
Yeah, now look at those stories. They relate exactly to what you're doing. Because it's attempting to, whether it be humanity is growing up, which is one, right? A global brain awakens. We're on a heroic journey, planetary birth, transitioning to holistic economics, trusting the power of love. And he's curated these stories with amazing detail. And that's part of what I think you're doing. When what we're trying to do together is create a new story about what does it mean to be alive at this time? What does it mean to be engaged in the community? How do we create a new story?
Yeah. So you're feeling that like the stories is kind of what stays with people. If it gets too kind of cognitive and analytical, it doesn't stay with people as easy.
I think the opportunity is to articulate your life like a work of art, right? Your story. There's challenges and choices and outcomes. Something happened that you made the choice to do this. It's a story that you have to tell. If you want to say it now, I'd love to hear it, but at some point you're going to say, this was happening for me, and then I realized, no, it's not okay. I can't. I'll never forget that you down at that rally, people screaming at each other, going up to them, what about empathy? Empathy, and something led you to do that, right? You made that choice, and now it's led to you having 100 of these interviews, right? That's your story.
Yeah.
story of Edwin, the story of us, the story of now, weaving these together. I think stories and storytelling is one way that we build the empathy for each other and we build the intimacy with each other. We need to really discover different ways of being. I mean, if we don't change our direction, we're going to wind up where we're headed. And therefore, I'm looking at every powerful tool I can find to help shift the story.
Yeah. Well, kind of this project that I'm doing with these dialogues is how do we build a culture of empathy? And the overall vision is to put together like a blueprint. Take these stories, kind of organize the different ideas, and put it into a bit more of a systematic structure that
Yeah,
and then we can kind of draw from. And so,
that's fabulous. That's such a gift.
I hope we can kind of continue. At the dialogues, I'm seeing you looking. Maybe at the time, I'm not sure if you're feeling a
No,
little pressed for
it's
time,
the
but
here. It's the mailman.
oh,
No.
okay. Uh-huh.
I mean, people can only take so much of me anyway. So
Yeah, I like to go for about an hour. We're about there.
yeah,
These are long dialogues, but I think it takes a bit of a longer dialogue to kind of delve into this stuff, and we can always do excerpts and kind of do other
that's
shorter
what I was thinking
projects.
too. Yeah, I'd love to see your greatest hits, like Larry King when he retired there, or like Johnny Carson, right? It would be. I'd love you to take some time to, I don't know if you're jotting. Now the Car Talk guys are retiring from NPR.
Yeah.
Been rating every call over the years. They like on a 1 to 5. They have enough 5s to like stay on the air for another 8 years.
Wow.
So I don't know if you're doing something similar at the moment you do these, where you kind of make some annotations. Then we could get Edwin's greatest hits.
I'll put my extensive staff to work on it right away.
But the empathic 100.
The empathic 100. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, okay. Is there any other things that you feel we should cover? We can go on, and we can continue on. Maybe being more specific in future dialogues or do some panels. And was there anything in this dialogue that you would like to talk about before we bring it to a close?
The one thought I had, I said this a few minutes ago, but this is again what I learned from my teacher about this, is that we are discourses, right? Empathy is a discourse. Imagine, you walk into a house you've never been in before and it's full of all these rooms, right? And you enter a room is like entering a discourse. And there's people already in that room, so you're catching up. So we're all learning about empathy, right? It would be sweet to know your distillation in terms of the classics, what's the core ideas and texts about it? What's the history of the conversation of empathy? What's the current state and future speculations about empathy? What are the elementary texts available for people to learn about empathy? Those are the things I think, if you can continue to do what you're doing and serve us that way, it would be enormous, so that people can enter, your world there and find the kind of resources to speak to them wherever they're at, and hopefully inspire this greatness and goodness in them, right? So that they can be more effective where they are to create that culture of empathy. I think it's probably a multiplicity of cultures of empathy that will yield the culture of empathy that you seek.
Yeah, somebody said that it's wisdom. Like if you're empathizing, the more you're empathizing and expanding your connection, that's kind of what wisdom is.
Well, in that regard, what we need is an intergenerational, cross-cultural way of operating, because the 60s, I saw this phrase the other day I loved. There was in their 60s from the 60s, working with this next generation, right? So we may have the wisdom, those of us who are elders now, and this next generation has the energy, and we need to find a way to collaborate to build this culture of empathy, because it's going to take, and they'll be the ones who are going to be inheriting what we're leaving here. So I think that part of the bridge, and the Generation Waking Up project is a fabulous one if you haven't been in touch with Joshua Gorman and those guys. It's grown out of the Pachamama Alliance. So I think we need to have an intergenerational, cross-cultural culture of empathy. And in that way, those of us who carry years of experience can share, and the energy we can be inspired by what this next generation is doing.
Yeah, so really get together with the whole variety of ages and variety of people to kind of work on this together.
I think there's no other way. There's no other way.
Well, okay, then maybe we'll bring it to a close now. I can talk to you for hours and hours, but somewhere we got to draw the line, the arbitrary line here.
Yes,
and
boundary that separates us. So you're going to leave me. That's what you're telling me now.
Yeah, I have to leave you.
Thick.
Unless you want to go, I can stop this recording. We can do a whole nother hour.
A double album. A double album. Oh, no, this is good.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, John. And look, just we'll pick it up and talk soon.
I'm going to go back to being a selfish, self-centered person now.
Oh.
The confidence that you're taking care of creating the culture of empathy. Not to do anything for it.
Yeah, well, you're going to go back and deal with the compassion folks over there. I know.
Compassion games. We got the compassion games. We're inviting you to the games.
Oh, the compassion games. That's great. Let us know more how that develops. That sounds
Survival,
great.
Survival of the kindest.
It's like your creativity. It's like just this ongoing creative, process that's kind of happening over there. I can just feel the creativity bubbling. And okay, take care. Bye.
Peace out.
Peace out.
See the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.